For 128 days, the names Lily and Jack Sullivan have hung heavy over this community. Two children, 6 and 4 years old, gone without a trace from their own backyard. Their laughter cut short, their footsteps erased, their innocence swallowed by a silence no family should ever have to endure. And yet someone knew, someone always knows. For months, neighbors whispered, parents pleaded, and police searched every corner of the woods. But while the world held its breath, while families lit candles and prayed for the impossible, one man sat on the edge of suspicion, quiet, waiting, unbroken by guilt or mercy. His name is Daniel Martell. Tonight, he is no longer free. Authorities have placed him in custody. But let's be clear, this is not justice, not yet, because what matters most, the truth about what happened to Lily and Jack, remains hidden in the shadows of May 2nd, the day they vanished. The questions linger like smoke that will not clear. Where were they taken? Why did no one intervene sooner? And how many warning signs were ignored before two children simply disappeared under the eyes of adults who should have been watching. This is not only the story of a crime, it is the story of responsibility abandoned. It is the story of a system that moved too slowly. And it is the story of two children who never should have been left unprotected. So ask yourself, when the silence first fell, when the swing was left moving with no one to push it, why did it take this long for someone to be held accountable? And more importantly, how many more children will be forgotten if stories like this are allowed to fade away? Do not turn away. Do not let Lily and Jack's names sink into another cold case file. Stay with this story. Subscribe and keep their voices alive, because silence is what failed them once, and silence is what will fail them again if we allow it. May 2nd, 2025, a morning. And like any other in Landown Station, a quiet rural stretch of Nova Scotia where neighbors know each other by name and children are often left to roam the backyard without fear. But that ordinary morning fractured into something unthinkable. 6-year-old Lily and her 4-year-old brother Jack were suddenly gone. Their shoes left behind, their toys scattered. No cries for help, no footprints leading to safety, just absence. Within hours, the response was massive. RCMP officers swarmed the area. Helicopters cut across the skies. Drones swept over thick forests. Search dogs pulled handlers deep into brush and ravines. Hundreds of volunteers combed through swamps, barns, and back roads, calling the children's names until their voices broke. For days, every sound, a snapped twig, a distant rustle, felt like it could be them, but it never was. And the strangest truth settled in quickly. There were no confirmed sightings, not from the moment they disappeared. No one saw Lily and Jack leave the property. No driver passing on. Gearlock Road reported a glimpse of two small figures wandering alone. Nothing. Two children erased daylight light as if the world had closed around them and refused to give them back. The vulnerability of their ages cannot be overstated. Lily old enough to know fear, but still trusting. Jack barely able to put together full sentences, still reaching for comfort in the hand of an adult. Children who would follow if told to. Children who believed that adults always tell the truth. Their parents issued statements through tears, pleading for help. The grandmother stood before cameras, her voice trembling, begging the world not to stop looking. The community rallied. Neighbors offered food to searchers. Strangers donated flashlights and fuel. Everyone wanted to believe this story would end with the children carried home, wrapped in blankets, asleep in the back seat of a cruiser. But with each passing day, hope thinned. Helicopters circled with no answers. Dogs came up empty. Volunteers walked miles only to return with nothing but mud on their boots. And the silence deepened. So, we are left with the question that cuts sharper than any other. How does a 6-year-old girl and her 4-year-old brother vanish from their own home while adults who should have been guardians slept soundly? How is it possible that in a world full of cameras, phones, and neighbors, two children could simply cease to exist, unseen, unheard, and unprotected? In every missing child case, there is always one figure whose shadow grows longer as the days stretch on. In the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan, that shadow belonged to Daniel Martell, the children's stepfather. He was no stranger to the area, a neighbor, a familiar face, someone who blended into the quiet rhythms of Landown Station. On the surface, he was simply part of the family, the man who shared their home. But almost from the first hours of the search, questions began to settle around him like fog no one could see through. Police interviewed Martell multiple times. They pressed him on where he was, what he saw, what he did in the moments before the children vanished. His answers shifted, sometimes just slightly, sometimes in ways that made investigators uneasy. There were inconsistencies in his timeline, gaps where his story bent, details that seemed rehearsed, and moments when silence felt louder than words. Authorities administered a polygraph. They seized items from the home and from areas connected to him: clothing, a blanket, objects that would later undergo forensic analysis. The official line was cautious: no suspect, no charges, just routine steps in a complex case. But behind closed doors, the spotlight kept circling back to him. And then there was his behavior. To some, Martell appeared withdrawn, distant, even numb in the face of two missing children. To others, he was defensive, sharp, unwilling to sit with questions for long. Sometimes he cooperated, answering calls, showing up when asked. Other times he turned evasive, retreating into himself as though he believed the less he said, the safer he was. The community noticed. In a town where people talk, whispers carried quickly. Neighbors speculated that Martell knew more than he admitted. Some wondered why he seemed so calm, while others were breaking under grief. Others pointed to moments, small things, gestures, slips of the tongue that felt wrong, though they couldn't prove why. Looking back, the warning signs were there. His shifting stories, his guarded manner, his uneasy place in the investigation. The problem is, warning signs do not equal evidence, and evidence is what law enforcement needs. For months, the case hovered in that terrible in-between space where suspicion runs high but proof remains just out of reach. And yet, even then, the sense was growing. Daniel Martell could not be ignored. The silence around him wasn't just absence, it was weight. Heavy, undeniable, and waiting to break. The signs were there, but signs alone don't build a case until now. For months, investigators appeared stuck. The forest had been combed over, tips dried up, and the case seemed to hover in silence. But the truth was, detectives were not standing still. Behind closed doors, they were waiting, patiently piecing together every scrap of evidence until the picture could no longer be denied. What finally emerged was a trail that pointed back again and again to Daniel Martell. Forensic tests revealed connections between him and items recovered near the edge of the search zone. Objects investigators now believe were deliberately discarded. Clothing fibers, subtle traces that linked him to the very ground others had searched without finding answers. At the same time, his own words began working against him. Inconsistencies in his alibi, gaps in his timeline, details that once looked like nervous mistakes now took on a different weight. The hours he could not explain, the movements that didn't match surrounding accounts. Piece by piece, the contradictions stacked higher. Detectives have not laid out every reason publicly, and that silence is deliberate. In a case this fragile, authorities hold back details to protect the investigation, to ensure that what they reveal in court cannot be undermined later. But what they did confirm is clear. The evidence against Martell became strong enough that waiting any longer was no longer an option. And then came the arrest. The moment Martell was taken into custody, the fragile ties holding his household together shattered. The children's mother, once by his side, once defending him against suspicion, cut him off completely. She broke away, blocked him on social media, and severed all remaining contact. To many, it was the act of a woman who had seen enough, who could no longer stand beside the man now, accused in connection with her children's disappearance. So, the quiet was broken, not by children running back into their mother's arms, not by voices calling out from the woods, but by the sharp metallic click of handcuffs locking shut around Daniel Martell. For the first time in months, the community saw a sign that justice might still have a path forward. But they also knew the most important answers, the ones about Lily and Jack, were still being kept behind closed doors. Even with Daniel Martell in custody, the central truth has not changed. Lily and Jack Sullivan are still missing. Over 700 tips have poured into the RCMP, each one logged, each one chased, each one stretching resources thinner. Forensic teams tested clothing, fibers, soil samples. Polygraphs were administered, interviews stretched long into the night. Yet despite the mountain of effort, no one has found the children. No safe return. No remains, just absence that grows heavier by the day. And with every day, another question haunts the case. Could this have been stopped sooner? Could Martell have been confronted earlier when his stories shifted? Could investigators have acted faster, pressed harder, refused to let the inconsistencies slip through the cracks? To families waiting for answers, those are not academic questions. They are wounds that never close. The frustration has spread far beyond the investigation. Neighbors who once searched side by side now speak in anger, divided over blame. Some point to the parents who face scrutiny with every word they say. Others lash out at law enforcement, accusing them of wasting precious days. In the middle of it all is a grandmother, her voice trembling in interviews, repeating the only plea that matters. We just want them home. But home is never felt farther away. The bedroom walls still stand. The toys remain. The swing in the yard still waits. Yet without the children, every object feels like evidence of what was lost. The failure to protect Lily and Jack does not rest on one man alone. It stretches wider, of a system too slow to connect the dots, through a silence that lasted when it should have been broken. Through the hesitation that allowed suspicion to live in the shadows instead of in the light. The truth is brutal. Responsibility was abandoned. Warning signs were overlooked. And two small children who trusted the adults around them are still out there somewhere between hope and memory. Lily and Jack Sullivan did not vanish into thin air. Children do not simply dissolve into the woods. They were taken from the safety they should have had, and they were failed by the very people and systems that should have protected them. Daniel Martell now sits in custody, but custody is not closure, and arrest is not the same as answers. And until Lily and Jack are he found this story is not finished. It is suspended, hanging in a silence that no parent, no grandparent, no community should ever have to endure. Think of what those children must have felt. A 6-year-old who still believed in the honesty of grown-ups. A 4-year-old who still clung to small comforts, who could not yet understand danger. They trusted, they followed, and they were betrayed. This case should not only be about one man in handcuffs. It should be about all the warning signs ignored, all the moments of hesitation, all the questions unasked until it was too late. We must confront the fact that 2 children disappeared under watchful eyes in a neighborhood full of people, and still no one stopped it. And so we are left with the truth that should make every listener uneasy. The failure to protect Lily and Jack is not only Martell's. It belongs to all of us who choose comfort over confrontation, who look away when something feels wrong, who let silence carry on because speaking up feels heavy. The story of Lily and Jack is not a story to consume and move on from. It is a question to carry. If children are not safe in their own homes, if their laughter can vanish into silence without immediate answers, what does that say about us? What does it say about the world we have built for them? Do not turn away. Do not let their names be reduced to a headline or a cold case gathering dust in some filing cabinet. Keep their memory alive. Keep pressing for answers. Subscribe. Stay with this investigation, and do not allow silence to become complicity, because silence is what failed Lily and Jack once, and silence is what will fail them again if we allow it.